All right, hello crypto community. Jeff Kirdeikis here with the CTO of OmiseGO, Kasima. Thank you so much for coming on the show today to chat a little bit about this incredible project that you have going on.
Thanks so much for having me.
So for someone, just to start super high level, for someone who has never heard of cryptocurrency at all, how would you explain OmiseGO and who in the world is benefiting from this and how are they benefiting?
Okay, so for someone who hasn't heard of any cryptocurrency, I guess we probably should start there. So cryptocurrency is a decentralized network of people to exchange value and operate logic on that value. That's probably a very high level explanation. The issue that OmiseGO is looking to solve is historically, because of the way cryptocurrency networks are run, they can be very slow. And so throughput becomes an issue, and it's been a kind of a common issue, a very notable issue over the past couple years of cryptocurrency research. So OmiseGO was founded on the idea that we would try to bring an implementation of what's known as a layer 2 scaling solution to one of the main blockchains or cryptocurrency networks, which is Ethereum. And so the layer 2 scaling solution that we're working on is known as Plasma. And so that has been under heavy community research for the past 2 years, including our own efforts around that. And so we are working really hard to try to bring a production implementation of Plasma as a product for everyone to use. And the question, I guess, the second part of your question is who it can benefit. And so basically I guess we can start with cryptocurrencies around the ability to exchange and operate on value in a way that's decentralized and not centrally controlled. And for us, it's basically anyone who's using those applications or currencies done in a way that's cheaper with more throughput.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say, on a consumer side or a business side, an example use case of, when someone is going to be using OmiseGO in their daily lives?
So things like regular payments. So being able to utilize, one of the problems in cryptocurrencies right now is the volatility, but being able to utilize things like stable coins to do just everyday daily payments. That would be one use case. There's also the possibility of doing things like loyalty points or game tokens, things like that. But the more exciting stuff that's happening is really around this idea of decentralized finance. And so being able to possibly remove intermediaries from various financial structures, let's say, or financial instruments. And for us, we are building the OmiseGO network in a way that will potentially allow people to build those kinds of instruments on top of our network.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. And like you mentioned, because I agree with the volatility, that's a huge issue that a lot of people see in regards to payments over a cryptocurrency network. And so stable coins are out there right now. And you could say even that there's a lot of payment coins or like stable coins out there that, have a pretty quick transaction throughput and pretty low cost. I see, in general, there's, I'd say 4 main categories in the cryptocurrency space that like projects aim for: security, decentralization, speed, and cost. And so in terms of OmiseGO versus different projects out there, how is Plasma competing or one-upping what these other projects or just a simple coin is doing?
Yeah, so one thing that is really exciting about Plasma and what sort of defines the layer 2 scaling is the security aspect of it. Because of the way it's built, we can provide this interesting combination of speed and throughput plus the security aspects. Since we borrow or extend the security of Ethereum over our network, we basically are able to boot up a payment network or a transaction network that has the same security characteristics as Ethereum does. Mm-hmm. But since we're starting with running it in a proof of authority consensus, we are also able to provide a certain level of speed and throughput that we couldn't do before.
Right. And so, obviously Ethereum is going to be moving to a different consensus model fairly shortly. How does that impact OmiseGO?
I mean, for us, we are a multiplier on top of that.
Right.
And so that's going to be really great for us as well.
Perfect. So I think, one of the main things in cryptocurrency is like, we're all talking about mainstream adoption. This is the big thing that we want. The more users that can come on, the better. And I think, a term that I've been heard around, tossed around a lot is grandma proofing. So, how would you, is OmiseGO, would you say grandma proof? What is, maybe walk us through, what's that process on like using the app, being able to exchange currency? Are people going to be needing to put in their seed keys? Like how easy is this ideally going to be getting in the future?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question, and that's something we're very, very focused on, because I think as I think about it, the world doesn't need another network that is really another crypto network that's really hard to use.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that process comes through the product and UX work that we need to put in place, and then obviously as we talk about blockchains and cryptocurrencies and self-sovereignty, there is a bit of there's a trade-off that you have to make around. I mean, this is true of all security, around usability and security.
Yeah.
And so for us, I think we have to be really smart about where we do some of those trade-offs, where we allow people to sort of scale into reaching sort of the ultimate level of self-sovereignty, which is something that we totally believe in. But we also want to be able to ramp people up into it. And so I don't think that we are necessarily looking for a perfect, the perfect is the enemy of done, this kind of thing. We're not necessarily looking for an absolutely perfect solution, but we're looking for something that's pragmatic and practical. And so a lot of the work we're doing right now is sort of defining some of that ramp up into the system, where we can allow people to take on full sovereignty if they choose to, but also offer options where there is some version of sort of minimized trust, right? So there might be some trust in the system, but you have a certain level of control, or you sort of opt into that level of trust. And that's the kind of the way that we're thinking about how to approach usability. But that is for sure one of the most critical pieces of what we're working on here.
Right. And just to kind of break that, what you said down there, because I totally see what you're saying. When you look at Coinbase and they offer something that's like custody, you don't have to be handling your private keys, but that's on the opposite side of self-sovereignty. So is what you're saying, just to kind of extrapolate, that people can opt in for this kind of simple Coinbase model, or they can opt in to hold their own private keys? Yeah,
something like that. I mean, Plasma is built on this idea of full trustlessness, right? Like, and that's something that's core to what we're offering. It's like, with Plasma, you can if everything works correctly, if you're a proper participant in the system, you can never lose your funds. That's the idea. In some of those cases, it would be difficult for someone to operate in a true, a full-fledged Plasma citizen. And so you start with this fully trustless model, and you're able to build these minimized trust services on top that people can opt into. And so it's possible that, for instance, in Plasma, there is this child chain and watcher construction. And the watcher really is the piece that maintains the security of the whole system. You may not want to operate your own watcher, or you may not have the technical skills to do that. In that case, you may possibly delegate the operation of the watcher and possibly your activity around that to a third party where you give some trust to. I mean, that third party might not be able to, wouldn't take custody of your funds, but could act in certain ways on your behalf.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So, since OmiseGO has been starting kind of development and launched the idea, and just so much support behind this project in the large scale crypto community, it's like kind of like the poster child of Ethereum. It really feels like this is the one that everyone's really ramping for. But within these last couple of years, there's been a lot of new competitors, say in the payment processing space, to be able to do, daily transactions. You could look at something like, as commonplace as the Coinbase Card or Crypterium. And how would you say, OmiseGO is really differentiating itself apart from those, and what your competitive edge is over, these solutions that are potentially very easy to use?
Yeah, so again, I'll come back to the idea that we continue to be trustless, and the payment space is really interesting for us, and that's one of the first thrusts of what use case that we're building. But the meat of what we're trying to approach here is not necessarily just payments. It's this idea of exchange. And so I think a lot of the differentiator we're building on top is not just the Plasma piece, but also also this all the features that we're going to put together for Exchange as well. And so I think we're looking at sort of a bigger model of what we're trying to build than just solely consumer payments.
For sure. Yeah. And that makes a lot of sense. And that ties into the next things that I'd love to touch on is just, the status of, like kind of the broad scope of what you guys are building on. So I'd love to just kind of break it down piece by piece, because I know so many people are following OmiseGO and the developments, and you guys do a phenomenal job of your AMAs and your roadmaps, and it's always highly engaged in the community. Some people, I feel like they don't like to read, but let's just get the audio piece out there. So what is the status right now in terms of Plasma?
So I don't know if you've read my How's OmiseGO Going, which I published a few months ago, but that kind of covers where we started maybe about a year ago in terms of developing Plasma and getting us to a protocol that we think is viable for production. And so that's been a lot of our work, has been a lot of research and engineering around making that production ready. And that really is just for what we call sort of peer-to-peer payments right now, and it's just simple UTXO payments over the network. A lot of the work that we've been doing this past, let's say, 6 months is this next step of engineering that allows us to be more flexible in how we operate the network. And so that's a lot of well, I guess I can dig into some of the more technical pieces, which is some of the, we were inspired by some of the predicate contract work that came out of Plasma Group. And so we were looking at ways to incorporate that into our work in a way that makes it easier for people to use our network. And so that has led us down the road of trying to implement, or in the middle of implementing, what we call our abstract layer design, which allows us to upgrade our network and add additional transaction types without asking everyone to get out of our current network and join a completely new network. So it's a lot of very foundational engineering work that we're putting together right now. A lot of it's sort of where our goal right now is to prove out Plasma in production, especially our flavor of Plasma, more viable Plasma, and get that as a foundation to build features on top of. So that's currently where we are, and we are, if you've been following our GitHub project boards or our repos, we are mad in the thick of it and trying to get that to a place where we can audit our contracts and do deployments and get something ready for people. At the same time, we are also in the middle of doing all kinds of exchange research on top of that as well. And so a lot of that has been the product and research work around what exchanges might need and what is interesting specifically about our construction, about Plasma, that a centralized exchange might, or not a centralized exchange, and centralized matcher might think is interesting and useful. And then melding that with the research of what we're capable of. Right. And so in parallel to all the engineering work and proving out Plasma, we're doing all this product and research around where the exchange work is. And I hope very soon we'll have something to announce and show people and invite people to play with and integrate with and build on top of. For sure. Yeah. And, I think it's all in the GitHub. When you see that the commits are going into the GitHub, that's what the community loves to see. And when you look at the Plasma commits, like they're on the ramp right now, like they're really going strong. So I think a lot of people are really excited to be seeing that. Yeah, the team is really heads down right now and pushing very, very hard. I'm super excited to be able to talk about the next thing as soon as we can. Right. Yeah. So you guys have a lot of other stuff in the pipeline. You mentioned exchanges, and you guys have your own DEX in the pipeline as well. How's that going, and what's that looking like right now? Yeah. So like I mentioned, a lot of it is in research. Plasma is a very interesting construction, and taking the security characteristics and the various behavior characteristics of what makes Plasma interesting and safe. We need to approach the service, or we basically need to approach it like a product. And so that involves a lot of interviews and conversations and looking at the problem that we're trying to solve. And so that's sort of where we're still in the middle of that, of talking to potential customers and talking to users and figuring out sort of where we need to refine the product design to make this actually useful for people. Right. yeah, a lot of that work is happening right now, and it's still a bit of a moving target since Plasma is a moving target. And so that's something that's coming up for us after we get all the Plasma foundational stuff in place. But I think that hopefully we're going to get something very interesting and actually very usable in place. And the design right now is well, if you look at the whole DEX community, designs are sort of coalescing around a general model of centralized matching and decentralized and non-custodial settlement. And so a lot of that research that we're pushing on is moving in that direction as well. And you can probably see a lot of that in our research repo and contracts repo as well.
Yeah, I've got it. And something that you guys have been doing a lot of work on in previous months is, the wallet. And it seems like you guys have shifted more so towards Plasma now. And so has the wallet kind of been put on the back burner? Is it, ready for production? Where are you guys at with the wallet?
So the wallet, we have taken it to a place where we believe it's useful for what we're working on in terms of the network. But, the engineering work around this kind of stuff is significant. And so as we're looking forward to like strategizing in terms of where we can add the most value right now, we are directing some of those resources over to the network just to make sure that we get all the foundational, answer those questions as best we can. And the wallet stuff I'm incredibly proud of that team. They've done amazing work, and it's a very useful tool. But I think that right now it's really a matter of priorities. So we're getting the wallet to a place where it integrates well with the network.
Yeah.
And I think what we'll do is we'll divert some of those resources over. We'll ask that team to come and help out with the network to make sure, especially with their other work integrating with the network, it'll be valuable as customers to come and help out to try to get the actual network launched. And then we will revisit, we'll probably come back to the wallet. But looking ahead, I think what we'll do is, it's an open source project. We will reach a milestone that we think is useful for people, and then we will probably invite the community to come and help out with development of the wallet.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense, and I think you nailed it with priorities, and it's just, you only have so many resources at your disposal. And it's like, okay, we need to build from the foundation first, understand, and then move on from there. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And so many people in the crypto space, they're just so focused on like quick results, and they don't see necessarily what's going on behind the scenes and the hard work that's going in, and the back and forth and the R&D and all these kinds of things. What would you say to the people who are kind of like feeling that like quick twitch or anxiety on like, where's the product? Like, just to kind of put their hearts at ease, where have been the hangups? Has it just more so been that shifting of priority into the foundational work? If I was someone who was, let's say, super concerned, how would you go about putting them at ease or putting me at ease?
I think one of the engineers said this to me recently. It's all new. We are at not even the cutting edge, but really the bleeding edge of technology. And when we started this project, Plasma was essentially a design pattern and idea. And taking that into implementation is one thing, but taking that to production is a whole other thing. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the work, it's a combination of all these things. I'll be honest, this is the hardest engineering project I've had to work on in my career. It's like, looking forward, it's a little bit unknown whether some of this stuff is going to work. And the uncertainty does add a lot of the excitement to the work, but also adds a lot of the difficulty to it because it's all new. We have to pave the way ourselves. And it comes all the way down to things like tooling around some of the frameworks that we deal with, or things like best practices around how to reach production. Yeah. Some of that stuff is not defined, and so we have to build a lot of that stuff ourselves. And so some of the maybe perceived velocity that seems like it's not going quite as fast as people want. It's because it's all, we're paving the road as we go here. And so that's a big part of it. The other piece I would say is that, getting software to something that works is something that is relatively straightforward to do. That's like, the difference between getting software that does something to getting software to production ready is significant.
Yeah.
And so that's really our goal here. We're trying to build the safest, most production-ready implementation of Plasma possible. And we have an incredible team here, people with extensive production experience. But I think it comes down to things like, this is going to be somewhat cliche too, but like the 80-20 rule, right? Where the last 20% of the work takes 80% of the time.
For sure.
And we are definitely inching into that area, and looking at sort of all the details and the minutiae that we need to plug to make sure that this is a watertight, production-ready Plasma implementation.
Yeah, for sure. And, and part of being, watertight, and, you mentioned best practices, and something that's actually recently happened in terms of regulations with the OmiseGO team is, the Bittrex delisting. And I know you can't comment on like tokenomics or price, but I just want to kind of touch on, the legalities and regulations around government agencies, and how are you guys, going about that? Obviously, you're trying to be a global payment solution, and to a regard, crypto is outside of government control, but in certain ways too, it still is within that control. So how are you guys navigating those waters, and what attention are you putting towards that?
I'm probably not the right person. I have my own opinions about this, but I'm probably not the right person to talk about this.
That's fair.
I'd probably have to hand you off to our business and legal teams to talk a little more about regulatory strategy. We do have one, and we're approaching it, but I don't want to mess it up, so I'll defer on that one.
That's fair. I think that's a strong deferral. Good call. Earlier also before, you mentioned like, will this work? Because like you say, you're on the bleeding edge of this technology, and, even cryptocurrency, I feel like all of us are in this space where like, it's an inevitability, is like that gut feeling in all of us. And it's just the writings on the wall with Libra and big corporations, and it really feels on the wall. But, what is that kind of tipping point where you're like, okay, this is it working, this is it not working? Where are those kind of gray areas where you could say like, okay, yeah, we gave it our best shot, but it just didn't work? Because I guess the best way to summarize the question is, what are those challenges that could make it potentially not work?
Maybe I'll backtrack a little bit, and I want to make it clear that not working is not a binary state for us. It's not like we're going to throw our hands in the air. When I say, just to calm people's nerves a little bit, it's not like we turn it on and it doesn't work and we walk away. This is all part of an engineering process, right? And so for me, not working is part of the cycle. Right. And a lot of engineering is really about mitigation of failure, and learning from that process and iterating on that process and improving on that process. So in the long term, I want to be clear that I have incredible amounts of confidence that we're going to get something useful and something that has value for people. Right. But in terms of getting to a place where, let's talk about gray area and how we define working and not working. For me, a lot of it is making sure we get something out in production and really seeing stuff happen over time. It's the difference between theoretical and practical, right? And engineering is incredibly practical. It's all about seeing things in the real world, how systems behave, and seeing whether the things our assumptions play out the way that we think they'll play out, and then learning from that process and doing more engineering on top of it. And so the definition for me around working is really trying to get something out there and seeing it stand up. It's very similar. I think about things like Bitcoin anti-fragility. This idea that Bitcoin's been secure for over a decade now. Yeah. And so that says a lot about the protocol. And it's like, the difference between the theoretical white paper on Bitcoin versus seeing software in production, for over a decade, really, to me, defines what working is. And so that's what we're trying to get to as best we can, to try to get something out there, mitigate the risks of failures and bugs, and those will happen. This is an engineering project and it's software. Software has defects, software has bugs. And really the work that we're trying to do here is ways to be resilient, to be able to recover from those bugs in a way that people don't lose funds, or we limit some of the damage, things like that. And so that's all the engineering work that we're trying to put in to try to get to something, to get to a place where we can see this thing run and be in production and get stress tested and get proven out.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And maybe the next question I want to ask is maybe not necessarily related to your role as CTO, but so I'll just kind of give your opinion on it. But in terms of partnerships that OmiseGO has been, landing or in conjunction with, what have been some of the ones that you've been like, okay, this is a big one, I'm excited about this, and this holds a lot of promise?
Unfortunately, I also can't talk about partnerships. A lot of that is due to the fact that you know, we sign these contracts and they're in early discussion, and so I think I would also have to defer to our marketing and comms team to cover that kind of stuff, because you know, it's all part of a communications strategy that we have in place, and so yeah, I'll have to defer that question as well.
That's totally fair. That's totally fair. So yeah, well, maybe more so in your pipeline then, because, you know, right now you guys have the focus on Plasma, but what is that thing that, you know, during your day to day, or even like on a week or month, what is it that like you're really excited to be working on right now? Is it that foundational stuff? Is it, you know, more big picture? You as a person, like, you know, what excites you most about the OmiseGO platform right now?
I love, you know, I am an engineer, and I love generally the whole thing around engineering and just building things for people. And so a lot of the stuff that we're doing in place right now is like all the contract work that we're putting in place is really engineering focused and putting something in place that makes life easier for people. And so that's some of the stuff that excites me, seeing some of the engineering work, the maturity around it. I mean, the difference between our previous set of Plasma contracts and our current set of contracts is like night and day, you know, and it's really matured to a place where it's a really nice piece of software that we can work with and maintain and iterate on. And so that stuff is super exciting.
Yeah.
The next thing that I'm excited about is our OmiseGO developer program and some of the partners we've seen come in through that. And that's actually open for any developer to join and get in on the discussion and talk to some of the people in those channels. But seeing things start to get built on top of our services is also super, super exciting. For instance, like Embark did a Plasma plugin for us. And so that was really awesome. There was a community video around describing how exits work, I believe, and that's really great. And we have some partners that are in the ODP pipeline that are building watcher services on top of us. And so that kind of like seeing our services get integrated to is also something that's super, super exciting for us. We're starting to build this sort of technical ecosystem that I think will be really, really, really critical for our success. And so all those things coming together is like what gets me up in the morning.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can appreciate that. And so, you know, the developer program is open. In your mind, what would be the ideal thing to get built on top of OmiseGO? You know, you mentioned two things that are exciting to you. What would, you know, if there's one thing where you're in your mind, you're just like, oh, I hope somebody builds this.
Oh man. Okay. Right now, I think one thing that would be super exciting if someone built their own implementation of our watcher, because I think that would increase the security of the whole system. Because we have one implementation right now, and if there is, I mean, we feel very good about that implementation, but and we think about it as a reference implementation. But if something's wrong about that, and those are the only watchers that are running on our network, there is the possibility of that issue cascading, right? That's the only, if that's like, you know, a mono version of watcher. If someone built another watcher in another language with their own sort of interpretation of the protocol, that would increase the resiliency of our network once we get it going. So that would be, if that starts happening, and I understand that we're working on documentation right now and some of the protocols are in flux. So I don't expect that to happen super soon, but once we get there, once we get in a place where the community can engage with building their own watcher, I would be super, super excited.
That's great.
If you're, and for anyone watching, if you're thinking about doing that, please join the ODP and come talk to us, and we would be happy to support that.
Right, and where exactly would they have to navigate to find this?
So developer.omisego.co is our developer site, and that's a starting page to get access to our resources, and then there's a sign up for the OmiseGO developer program, and you can drop in there, and then you'll get access to our Discord and our product managers and engineers to help guide you through the process of building stuff on our network.
Perfect. Well, that seems simple enough then.
Yeah.
Right
yeah,
on.
Please come. We're excited to have you.
I love it. Okay, well, Kasima, thanks so much. You know, you mentioned, you know, you're building a product that makes life easier for people, and that's what gets you up in the morning. And I think a lot of people realize this, and that's why there's so much enthusiasm behind OmiseGO, and everyone's seeing the work that you guys are put in, and the updates that you consistently come out with are hugely appreciated. And I thank you so much for coming on for a quick chat.
Thank you, Jeff. We appreciate it. And to all the community members, we very much appreciate your support, and we're working really, really hard to get something out the door.